So thank you all. So on behalf of Major General Beck, who is the PAE for Layer Protection, it's now called Layer Protection and Integration. Thank you. We're excited to be here. I am the Requirements and the Experimentation Division Chief inside the Formation-Based Layer Protection Future Capability Directorate, part of Futures Concepts Command, part of T2COM. That's a mouthful, right? But just think about Army requirements. That's what I do. And my team writes those for the Army for everything for engineers, military police, CBRN, and protection as a whole. And what I'm going to talk you through this afternoon, I'm going to give you our demand signal and our focus areas, but I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how we describe layer protection and how General Beck described it to the chief when he did his capability portfolio review, because it's a mind shift. When people think about protection, they think about force protection. We're not talking about just force protection where you have HESCOs around a base. It's layered and integrated, and it's offensive and it's defensive. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background about that, and then I'll get into the demand signal, and then we'll pull the panel members up and go over the panel. So next slide, please. Yeah, so this is our operational view of protection, and this is how the PAE describes protection everywhere he goes, to include the chief when he did his CPR. So you'll see that's just a picture of the battlefield, everything from the strategic support area to the deep fight. And at the bottom, you'll see 4 different areas that we're focused on. The first one being avoid being seen. So if you can avoid being seen on the battlefield, then avoid being characterized and avoid being hit and surviving if you're hit, is you can accept risk in those other 3 areas, right? And so General Beck's main focus is how do we keep the warfighter from avoid being seen? Things like mobile camouflage, obscuration and obfuscation, both in the EMS spectrum, EOIR and visual, right? We have smoke nowadays, it's mostly visual, but how do we get to that next multimodal obscuration capability where the enemy can't see us in a place where, you know, sensors are going to be everywhere on the battlefield and you're going to be sensed in everything that you do. Talk about avoid being understood. So how do we avoid being understood if we're seen? And so if we're seen, again, camouflage can help you with that. Obscuration can help you with that. If you go into avoid being hit, so avoid being hit, how do we stay in the fight, avoid being hit? Things like CBRN microsensors, which are tradable sensors that you can just deploy on the battlefield via UGV or UAS. So it tells the maneuver commander, hey, there's something bad there, don't go there. I need to maneuver around that. I don't care what it is at that point. The maneuver commander needs speed and tempo, and that's what the microsensors are supposed to help him do, understand where he can and can't go on the battlefield. And then if you're hit, how do you survive? So things like protection decision support tools. As the maneuver commander's priority protection list changes, he has assets to protect a thing. He needs to protect those things. Something on the battlefield changes. How do we dynamically change that protection list without having to go through a bunch of staff exercises, MDMP, military decision-making process, and get an answer to the commander quicker so they can make quicker decisions. Also things like autonomous robotic construction equipment forward. How do we dig fighting positions forward without soldiers having to be in the hazard? One of the main things that we're trying to do with layer protection is get the soldier out of the hazard, whether that's a CBRN hazard. You heard General Gibbs earlier talk about autonomous breaching. Autonomous breaching is in our portfolio. How do we do that both from an armored division or armored formation aspect as well as a light fighter aspect? Because those capabilities are very similar, but they're very different. In an armored battalion or brigade, you might have an armored breaching vehicle, big tank with a plow on the front of it that can proof, but light guys don't have that. So how do they proof a lane that's just been, you know, neutralized, or they think is neutralized, to make sure that it's neutralized? Then you'll see some of our S&T priorities, autonomous payloads. So we're really not focused on platforms. The Army will figure out what the platform is. You guys will help us figure out what that platform needs to look like. Our job is to give the builders of the platforms a swap that they need, size, weight, those kind of things, to understand what kind of platform the payload can fit on. And those are going to be mission specific, so we don't see one platform size fits all. That, you know, it may be as small as an SMET, or it might be as big as a, you know, vehicle not to be named any longer, the RCV, right? It could be that big. Corey Walls, how are you? I said that for you, by the way. Yeah. So we have S&T priorities. The CG's #1 focus right now for S&T is autonomous decon. He wants to know how do we do that and how do we do decontamination by non-aqueous means. So right now, if you're familiar with how the Army decons, it's water, right? But water's heavy, you got to carry it around the battlefield. how do we do that? How do we do that same level of decon without water? So that's a big S&T push right now. A couple of big S&T pushes are terrain shaping. How do we shape the terrain in the deep fight? What does that look like? Is it a launched effect? Is it something else? Is it a UAV? We don't know. And then from a breaching standpoint, from a bridging standpoint, right now, wet gap crossing, the mortality rate there is over 50% of the force as it crosses the river. We're trying to get to an autonomous rafting capability. So how do we do that where units are in their AO maneuvering, not in a static position like we used to be before they cross the river? That raft is ready. It calls the next unit up. They get on the raft. They go across. The raft comes back at a different location, so it can't be targeted, and it tells that unit, hey, I'm ready for you. Move up so you can go across, right? So how do we do that? Very difficult problem because you have different water flow rates and all the things that go with that. So those are some of our big challenge areas. I only have one slide, I believe. Is that right? I only have one slide, yeah. So I'm not going to take a lot of time. I want to get the panel members up here and let you ask questions. I know that was quick. Hope it was okay. If I could ask the panel members to come up. And I'll let them introduce themselves.
Good afternoon, Lieutenant Colonel Sloan. I am representing DevCom Chem Bio Center as well as the Layer Protection System Center. So I support those early life cycle S&T activities. So think applied research, initial prototype, breadboard prototype and concept demonstrations that align to those 4 operational categories you saw on the previous chart. So we have aligned our portfolio, our S&T activities to support Major General Beck in the way he sees the battlefield. So as the Systems Center, we coordinate across the multiple DevCom labs as well as those labs outside of DevCom, such as the Engineering Research and Development Center, ERDIC down in Vicksburg, to make sure that we are meeting the PAE's intent to remove that soldier from the hazard. As you know, he is prioritizing the autonomous decon as well as the autonomous breaching, so those autonomous level efforts that are cross-cutting across the portfolio in a way that we can reduce soldier involvement in those inherently risky operations. So I support those activities as part of the Systems Center and work with partnering with academia as well as with industry through CRADAs, through MOUs, through various means of collaboration methods to get after these activities.
Jeremy Shunke, I hope you're getting a rebate because I'm not getting paid for the second set. Talking about protection and layer protection, you consider, we're just changing words from defense and depth, but it's more than that. It's truly the 360 degrees, 3-dimensional, and in the different domains. Had a good conversation with Moses over lunch today. Part of the protection actually happens in forms like this. When I talk to industry, I'll talk about it needs to be scalable, it need to have redundant supply chains, things like that. But I also ask industry companies to have an ethos of information security, and that's what I mean by protection. If we can't protect our information, and we could talk about classified, unclassified, I don't look at it that way. I look at it, is it useful to the adversary? We could invest a lot of time and treasure in capability that our adversary may already know about if we don't protect that information. So I think that layered protection comes back to the homeland. For our theater army strategy, and we war game and we do simulations and we hire folks to do long studies for us to help prove what we already think we know. And one of the big things that we found out is we got to be able to survive that initial salvo. So they got to shoot, they got to move, they got to reload, they got to move, repeat. And part of that is protection, and it comes down, okay, is the vehicle hardened? Next thing is the signature managed to a point where we're protecting in our individual soldiers and our systems. And when I talk to folks and senior leaders, like, we didn't always wear camouflage. Your camouflage is a signature management, but now we need to manage everything else that we're putting off, and then possibly manipulate that. And then we also have a lot of considerations on the biotechnology side. You could seriously degrade an organization to be mission incapable if they have flu-like symptoms that go away in 3 or 4 days. The adversary may consider that a reversible effect when we talk about, kinetic, non-kinetic effects. So it's reversible. Okay, so the adversary is not going to worry too much about it. In the biotech realm, the paradigm has changed. Before, it was a splattering of some kind of biological agent. Now it can be pinpointed down to who might get sick and who might be out of the fight. And generally, soldiers are not folks with pre-existing medical conditions. They're fit, right? So I consider that a reversible effect. So it comes all the way from our patriots on down to that individual soldier being able to protect themselves in that layered approach. And we got to get comfortable with finding less costly solutions than a $1 million Patriot round, because what's going to happen in the Indo-Asia Pacific is thousands of rounds coming at us that we need to be able to hunker down, survive, so we can actually get into the fight.
Thanks, sir. So I think just to touch on that, so when you think about layer protection, think about 3 aspects. Think about the foundational aspect of protection, which is what the colonel said, and it's the soldier being understanding how to camouflage themselves, radio discipline, right, noise and light discipline, things that are taught at the basic training level. And then think about operational protection, where you start to include capabilities via system effects like defensive or offensive fires, or technical effects and tactical decoys. And then think about the system effect of protection, which is systems aggregated together to form a protective bubble around that organization as it moves across the battlefield. And not everybody is going to be protected by everything all the time, but the goal is to make sure that the unit has the protection it needs to accomplish its mission and survive. Right, that's the important thing there. The other thing I would say, in my day job as the requirements and experimentation lead, I talk to a lot of companies, and the very first thing I tell them is, listen, the Army doesn't really build anything. The Army buys a lot of things, and the Army procures a lot of things, and we can't do that without small business and large business and venture capitalists. So anytime anybody wants to talk about protection, just call me, reach me here, and I'll give you my point of contact, because if I can't connect you, if I can't help you in my world, I will connect you with the person in the Army that I think can help you, whether that's someone from the PAE for C2, counter C2, or cross-domain fires, or maneuver ground, it doesn't matter. If I think you have a capability that can help the Army, I will help you reach the person I think you need to get to. So I really appreciate you taking the time and coming here and listen to our pitch, so thank you. And we'll take questions if there are any.
This is why being a chemical officer is probably the hardest job, because, I don't know, no one's interested or no one wants to get into the mess of protection. But if there's any questions, it's extremely important. It's really near the top of the list for us out at Indo-PACOM.
Good afternoon. Dale Maru, Saronic Technologies. I just had a question. We talked about bridging and rafting capabilities here within the formation-based layer protection, but it was also brought up in the contested or combat logistics arena as well. Can you just talk about the differentiation and how you're managing that, or really where you engage if you're interested in something like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the layer protection portfolio spans across every single PAE, and almost all the CPEs. That's why they changed the name from CBRN to Layer Protection and Integration. So from a bridging standpoint and a construction standpoint, we write the requirements for those things for the Army, but the capabilities are developed by the CPE under agile sustainment and energetics, or just agile sustainment. Same thing for, I'll give you an example of the remote weapon station, CROWS, as you might know it. So it is developed under our center's purview, because we're the proponent for that, but it's being developed under CPE mission autonomy from a CPE perspective, right? So it's really, when the change happened, there's not a clean cut, hey, this belonged to you and it still belongs to you. There are things like terrain shaping and breaching. We write the requirements for those. Those fall under the maneuver ground portfolio. But the autonomy piece of that falls under General Biggs's portfolio from a CPE perspective. So there's a lot of cross PAE and CPE in the protection world, and we're still trying to, honestly, we're still trying to figure out a lot of that, like who has the responsibility to do what. The good news is the PAEs, at least our PAE has told us they meet bi-weekly. They talk about things like that, like what are you doing, what are you responsible for? This is what I think my authorities are, this is what I think I'm doing, right? These are what my guys are doing. And the other thing I think you should understand is that not all the PAEs have a staff of people to do work. Like the layer protection PAE is 4 people deep. A two-star SES, a chief of staff, and a lieutenant colonel. That's it. That's their staff, right? I'm an FCD guy, but we support them because he's the layer protection guy, and that's what we do, right? So there's a lot of cross there. And the other thing I would say about the PAE is, because I just saw Shimon walk in, Colonel Diane walk in, that the PAE is helping give the demand signal to the pit of what we want to go after, what our focus areas are, what our priority areas are. So our PAE has a material priority list, right, that he wants us to go after. The pit's helping us get after those things, and then hopefully when something works, they'll transition it back to the PAE to get to the larger Army through the requirements process, which is everyone says it's not a thing, but the requirements process is still a thing. It's just we're trying to do some other things faster before we get to the requirements process, so still happening. I would say the requirements process has shortened significantly. The paperwork has shortened significantly. Staffing has shortened significantly. So the way the department went with developing the PAEs and how they're changing ACIDs and the staffing is really, I think it's working. And I've been in this business a really long time, and it's the most radical change I've seen in a long time.
I'm sure we've got another question. You guys are just so good. You answered all their questions. No one's going to follow up with you later. No one's going to find you after this panel and ask the question that they were too afraid to ask right now, which means it's absolutely going to happen. So good luck. So, I mean, unless you have some final remarks, we would love to say thank you for this signal. Let's give them a round of applause.